Today I'm going to be doing a lovely spring landscape in watercolour, and I'm going to use the Gansai Tambi paints today for a change because I've had quite a few requests in the past for me to use them. I think a lot of people have got them, and I'm also going to use a little bit of gouache at the end. Now I have already done this picture before. I did an autumn version and I did a version with neo colour, but I've made a few changes to it and I'm going to do a nice spring version with the Gansai Tambi and gouache. So again, if you want to download the outline, it's quite a simple outline. If you don't want to draw it yourself, that'll be on my Patreon. You can just download that free of charge. I'll leave a link below in the video description. So as usual, just put some graphite on the back of the picture and use a nice sharp pencil to go over the lines, and it'll transfer onto your watercolour paper. Yeah, so I'm going to really try and put a video on every week, but I can't guarantee it at the moment. I'm just finding it hard to get back into the rhythm of making watercolour videos, and I feel like I really haven't done much watercolour painting, and then when you haven't done it for a while, you just feel like you can't do it anymore. So the last two paintings that I've done, I've struggled with them. You tend to forget if you have a break. So I'm going to pick out some nice spring colours, and I'm just going to try and do a simple painting. I'm going forward, I'm just going to try and make the paintings more simple, more beginner friendly. Okay, so the first colours I'm going to use are ultramarine, pale and cobalt blue. So that's for the sky. For the background, distant hills, I'm going to use pea green and turquoise green deep. So those are like kind of cooler greens for the background, and then some warmer greens for the foreground hills. Lime green, sap green light and sap green deep. So warm more to the front, cold more to the back, just to try and give the impression of distance. I'm also going to get some little balls of kitchen paper. I'm going to use that to make some clouds in the sky. So if you get those at the ready, and then they'll just be ready to use. And then I'm starting off by wetting the sky. I'm using a small mop brush, and I'm just wetting the whole of the sky area and slightly over the back mountains as well. So this is kind of what you want it to look like, just a sheen of water over the paper, but not too much. If you can see, it's beading up a little bit too much on mine. There's quite a lot of water, so I'm removing a little bit of that with the brush. Right, so I'm going to go in with the darker blue first of all. I'm trying to frame it a little bit darker to the outside, so I'm just dropping that into the wet area, and I want it a little bit lighter in the middle. So I'm using the lighter pale ultramarine in the middle area, and then I'm just going back and forth to try and make it just a little bit darker around the outside of the sky to kind of frame the picture. It gets a little bit streaky, so I then add a little bit more water on the brush just to smooth it out. And because it's a nice cotton paper, you can do that. You can keep working on the paper for a while. If it's not a cotton paper, you'll get some patches that will dry earlier, and then you've got a lot less time to kind of manipulate that paint around to how you want it. So now I'm going in with the tissue to just press out some of the colour and try and create some cloud shapes. So they tend to be a little bit more pointy at the top, broader at the bottom, narrower at the top, and I'm trying to make kind of two clouds, but I'm making one bigger than the other, just try and not make it uniform. And I keep twisting the tissue around as well, so that it's not making uniform little shapes, but trying to leave it more grey at the bottom, because clouds are more grey at the bottom and they're whiter and crisper at the top. And now after the clouds are in, it's a bit pale in the middle, a bit too pale, so I'm now adding some darker colour in there, especially above those clouds, because it makes the top of those clouds stand out. So just dabbing some of that cobalt blue in there, and then drying the whole thing off with the heat gun. And now I'm going to move on to the very back distant hills. So I'm using that pea green, which is quite pale, and the turquoise colour. I'm going to use this, it's just a round brush, number 4, just fairly small, with a nice point so I can get in those corners. So I'm starting with the pea green, putting this so I'm just painting the pea green in first of all, and then I'm going to add a little bit of the turquoise into the bottom, just to make kind of a gradient. And I'm just blending that upwards with the tip of the brush, and it left kind of a line, kind of a straight line. So I rinsed the brush out, dried it off so it's just damp and clean, and then I can use that to kind of get rid of that line and make it blend a little bit more. So I'm just going to do the same with the rest of the background hills, but I'm going to just vary the colour slightly. I'm trying not to make them all exactly the same. Okay, so I'm going to start on the large hill now. I'm going to do this one wet in wet. So I'm going to use the warmer greens, so the lime green, the sap green and the sap green deep. And I'm going to make it lighter to the top, darker towards the bottom. So I'm going to wet the whole area, and I'm going to go slightly over the trees over to the left. I'm going to take the water over those. I don't want the green paint to go on the foreground trees and house, so I'm only going to put the water where I want the green paint to go. So, and then I'm using some little cotton buds. I've got the cotton buds at the ready. I'm going to use those to lift out some highlights in those trees, the bushy trees over to the left. Yeah, so I'm just using a combination of all these greens to try and get it darker at the bottom, lighter to the top. So it's a little bit fiddly in and out with the different shades of green, just to try and get the look that I want. I've had some good news regarding my health. I've finally been given a date for my hysterectomy, so I'm absolutely thrilled. First of all, they gave me the 10th of April, then they've cancelled that, changed it to the 17th. So as long as it doesn't change again, I've only got another month to wait. So I'm absolutely thrilled to bits, because as soon as I've had this hysterectomy, I'm going to get the ovaries removed as well, and then I can go on the HRT, because the hot flushes I'm having are just pretty bad. I'm having about 2 to 3 an hour and they're really intense. But up until now, I haven't been able to take the HRT because I've got adenomyosis. That condition actually thrives on estrogen. So if I was to take the HRT now, it would make it worse. So I've had to suffer the hot flushes. But I've realised when I'm having hot flushes, the periods stop. So this has been going on for the last couple of years now. The periods slow down. I'll go for a couple months without one, and I'll maybe have a light one, but I'll be having hot flushes, and then the hot flushes will stop, and then the periods get really, really bad again, but no hot flushes. So even though the hot flushes are pretty intense and bad, I'm actually glad. I'm actually feeling well. Even though I'm having hot flushes, I'm feeling well because I'm not having them horrific periods anymore. So yeah, one more month, and I can have level hormones and I can just get on with my life. I just cannot wait. I mean, it just goes to show how ill I was, because now I'm having hot flushes and I'm still getting like low mood. That's why I'm struggling to make videos. But even with that, even with the flushes and my moods are up and down all the time, I still feel well. This is me feeling well with all that going on, because that's how unwell I actually was. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's causing me depression or anything. Just flat mood where you don't really have much interest in like doing artwork and stuff like that, or doing anything. And when I'm in a good mood, everything goes great. I enjoy what I'm doing. When my mood's like low, and I know it's all to do with hormones, but it's like I doubt everything that I'm doing. It's hard to explain, but it's like, this is crap, this is rubbish, nobody's going to want to watch this. You know, I just like go into perfectionist mode. Whereas when I'm in a good mood, yeah, everything's just fine, everything's happy, and it's like, oh, it just doesn't matter, you know what I mean? The videos don't matter. I don't obsess over whether it's going to be a terrible video or not. So I just cannot wait until it's all sorted out. I know this is probably too much information for some people, but people ask me all the time about, you know, have I got a date for my operation, and, you know, wishing me well, telling me that they've had a hysterectomy as well, and it was brilliant, and, you know, everything changed for them afterwards. So yeah, some people, you know, do want to know about my health, and I'm reluctant to even talk about that, because I don't know if I'm either boring people or it's just too much information talking about periods and stuff like that. But I think the majority of people don't mind, and they just want to know. So I'm just gonna tell you what's happening. Okay, so back to the picture, and I'm going to put in some little background trees and bushes. So I'm just starting off with the lighter colour just to create the kind of base. So I've just used that really pale green, and then I'm getting some of the darker green and dropping just some little patches more towards the bottom, and just dropping some little dark dots in there to give the impression of some texture in some trays. And if you noticed, I was getting the paint right from the pan, that dark paint, just so that it's not too watery, and then you've got more control over where that colour actually goes. If it's too watery, it'll spread too far, and then you just lose all control of it. So I'm putting some over onto the right hand side as well, just doing the same kind of thing. So I'm doing actual voiceover for this. I'm trying to make some changes to my videos just to make it easier on myself, because I've realised I'm trying to explain what I'm doing while I'm actually painting. That's actually very, very, very difficult to do, because when you're painting, you're working it out, you're working out what you're going to do. So it's difficult to say, oh, I'm going to do this and now I'm going to paint that, because you kind of don't know what you're going to do until after you've done it. So it completely makes sense to add voiceovers. I've always hated doing voiceover. It's so tedious. But I realise now it's probably just going to be easier. Yeah, so I'm just going to try and make the video making process easier for myself, and then hopefully I'll have more success getting the videos actually made, because when everything's too difficult, it's just so hard. So now I'm doing these foreground ones, pretty much the same, starting with the light colour and then dropping some dark in the bottom, because I'm trying to maintain the highlight and I don't want the colours to run into each other. So I'm doing them individually and then drying them off before I move on to the next one next to it, if that makes sense. Now, I did actually make a mess of these. I ended up changing it because I made them too dark and I wanted them to be a little bit fainter so that the trees next to the houses will stand out more, but I ended up making the colour too strong on these, so I do go back in and change that a little bit. But I would still recommend doing it and following along, because it's still good practice work and wet in wet, but I would say try and make it a little bit lighter, and then you don't have to go back in and remove some of the paint like I do. So now I'm just moving on to the foreground trees, and I'm using the lighter green, the lime one, the much brighter one, and I think it's the dark sap green, and I'm just making a nice blend there, dark to one side and underneath, light to the left hand side, just to give a nice highlight as though the sun is falling on those. And then I'm drying it off and then going in and finishing the other ones off, just so that they don't run into each other. But I do end up going over the whole thing with gouache at the end, so, but you might get it right, I got it wrong. But that's the thing with watercolour, it just doesn't always work out how you want it. I mean, if you look at the trees in the top right, I really like them in the distant ones. I think they turned out really nice. So I'm just correcting a few little mistakes here using eradicator brushes, which are really stiff brushes that help you scrub the paint out. One's by Rosemary and one is by Billy Showell. So what the problem I've got here is these trees all look the same kind of colour and tone. Now I want these ones at the front to really stand out a lot more, and the other ones to kind of fade into the background a bit. So I'm going to lift a bit of that paint out with these brushes, just wet the area, scrub on it a little bit, and then lift some of that paint back out. And I want the foreground trees to be a lot warmer as well, so warmer greens, stronger greens at the front, and then a little bit cooler, a little bit fainter to the trees behind. And then I'm going to just leave it like that and finish it off with some gouache, because I've kind of messed it up. So I'll try and make it a bit nicer later on with some gouache over the top at the end. So I've given the house a red roof and yellow ochre on the walls of the house, and I'm just going to make some little alterations. So it was all looking kind of the same tone, so I'm going to lift some of this colour back out. So I've wet the whole area, and I'm going to use the kitchen roll to just dab some of that out, and I think that makes the fields look a whole lot better. They were a little bit too uniform, too flat, so it's got a little bit more unevenness in now, and I think that makes it look a bit better. And then I'm just adding a little bit of colour back into those bushes because I took too much colour out, and I've also taken some colour out of the house as well. Everything was looking kind of the same tone, so I'm making some variations in the tonal values, and I'm also lifting out some of the highlights again on the trees. But I think at this point I hadn't decided that I was going to use the gouache, so I do, as I said before, I do just go over it in gouache. So I'm using this greenish yellow green, which is a warmer green, and I'm just glazing a layer over the top of those trees just to warm them up, make them different from the background trees. I'm using Prussian blue to paint all the little windows in, and the raw Umber deep, which I think is the only brown in this set. I'm using that for the doorway and to paint the little trunks on the trees as well. And I will put all the colours that I've used in the description below underneath the video. I'll list them all. Okay, so now for the gouache. Now I'm using the spring palette from the Holbein Gouache sets, and I've got these little maiden palettes that I got specifically to use with these paints because there's 12 little wells, so I've got 4 of the palettes to use, one for each season, and then I don't need to keep washing them out and wasting leftover paint. I'm not going to actually put the paint in there to set hard, but if there's a little bit left over that I haven't used, I'll just leave it there and then use it again. So I ended up, there wasn't really many darker greens in the spring one, so I've had to get the summer one out again, and I'm just picking out some greens and a few little pastel colours just to make some flowers in the foreground. But first of all, I'm gonna try and tidy these trees up, so I'm just practicing. So this is a fan brush, and it's a Jackson's Own Stippler fan brush, so I'm just using the very corner just to add some kind of maybe orangey yellow looking highlights, and then I just go in with some green and try and kind of blend it out. And the brush is it's not totally dry, but there's not much water on it at all. And then I go in with the dark green and just try and blend that in. As you can probably see by now, these bushes have absolutely beaten me. I can't get them right. Unfortunately, that's just how it goes sometimes, so I just did the best I could and decided to just leave it. And then I'm going to add a little bit of foliage and flowers just to the foreground. I'm also adding a little bit of extra dark shading on the foreground trees with the gouache as well, just to darken those shadows a little bit. I'm doing a dry brush effect here, so I'm kind of using the side of the brush, and there's not a lot of paint. It's not very watery, and I've just created that rough kind of texture to indicate some longer grass in the background. And then I'm doing these kind of longer strokes at the front here, so there's barely anything on the brush, and it's just giving a little bit of indication of grass. And then I decide to just go over the yellow bit, just dab, 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 and there's hardly anything left on the brush, but it's just adding a nice little bit of texture to that yellow area and breaking it up a little bit. I'm using this little Princeton Velvet Touch liner, and it's a 0/10 or 10/0, and I'm going to do some long strokes. Now this is a little bit tricky because what I'm trying to do is make them all look different, which isn't as easy as it sounds. So I'm going to put those all across the bottom and just try my best not to make them uniform. And then I'm using a little bit of water and I'm roughing some of them up. Some of them look a little bit harsh, so we don't want them all to be really strong. So I'm just kind of rubbing on some of those with some clean water. And now I'm going in and doing some little hints of flowers with the white gouache. So just back to using a normal brush. This is the number 2 round. I'm making them a little bit bigger towards the front and giving a little bit of a flower shape. And then lots of tiny little ones here and there. I meant to say earlier as well that I have uploaded a couple of videos on my colouring channel. The link's below in the description if you want to go and look on that. I've been managing to get one on every Wednesday, and then the plan is every Sunday on this channel, every Wednesday on the other channel. So that's the end of the picture. So I hope you've enjoyed the video, and thank you very much for watching.